The question that I want to answer is, what is God? What is God? If you're with us on Sundays, you'll know that our church is going through what we call the catechism. That's kind of a big, long word, but that's basically a word that means questions and answers about the faith. This year, our church has decided that we're going to take every single Sunday, we're going to answer a different important question about our faith. That's what our kids are actually learning in kids class. That's what Pastor Gabe is teaching your parents right now in the adult Bible study. And that's what we're going to do tonight as well. We're just looking at important questions, actually this whole year. Important questions about our faith that we ought to know the answer to. And so each week, you'll see a different face up here talking about this question. It's my face this week. You're stuck with this ugly mug. It might be different faces in the future. But the question I want to answer this week is the question, what is God? What is God? And our answer is this. God is the creator and sustainer of everyone and everything. He's eternal, infinite, and unchangeable in his power and perfection, goodness and glory, wisdom, justice, and truth. Nothing happens except through him and by his will. I'm going to say that one more time. The question is, what is God? And the answer is, God is the creator and sustainer of everyone and everything. He's eternal, infinite, and unchangeable in his power and perfection, goodness and glory, wisdom, justice, and truth. Nothing happens except through him and by his will. That is a dense answer. There's a whole lot of words, and I wish I could just spend 45 minutes unpacking that, but I can't because I have other things that I want to talk about. So we're just going to leave that right there and simply say, for tonight, I want to go broad and talk about just the concept of God. The concept of believing in God, believing in the existence of God. What do we mean when we say, I believe in God? Or if someone were to ask you, do you believe in God? What does that question mean? Here's one way we could think of that. We could look at the question, do you believe in God? And someone could say, yes, I believe that there is a force, there's a spirit, there's some energy in the universe that unites us all together and is powerful and causes good things to happen. For a lot of people, when they say, I believe in God, that's what they mean. They mean, I believe in some cosmic force. I believe in some spirit. I believe in something out there that I can't really define or explain, but it's good and it's powerful and it helps good things happen. And so we pray to God, the force, the spirit. You could think of it as the force in Star Wars, in fact. Many people, when they say, I believe in God, this is what they mean. I believe in a force. I believe in a good thing. As Christians, when we say we believe in God, that is not what we mean. We mean something far more specific. We mean that we believe there is a being, not a force, not a thing, not an it, but a being, a who, a person, a being who exists outside of nature, not contained by the world, who created nature, everything we see, everything we touch, everything we don't see and can't touch, created all those things. And he, this person, gives everything meaning and gives everything structure. We believe that God is the creator and sustainer of everyone and everything. He is eternal. He had no beginning. He's infinite. He has no container. He's unchangeable in his power and perfection, goodness and glory, wisdom, justice, and truth. There is no changing in God. God is the same today, yesterday, forever. He has all the power in the world. He is as perfect could be. He is the definition of goodness. He is glorious. There's no one like him. He has all wisdom and knowledge. He is the reason that things like justice and truth even exist. And nothing happens through him and by his will. And so what I want to do tonight in about 10 minutes, I think I have left, what I want to do in the next 10 minutes is I want to give you just 3 arguments for the existence of God. And I want to just get us onto a really level, basic playing field of, okay, how do we even know that God exists? Because it's one thing for a preacher to stand on a stage and say, you should believe in a God who is personal and cosmic and powerful and incredible, but it's a very different thing to say, and here's why. And so what I want to give you just quickly is reasons that you can say, I'm not an idiot for believing in God. Because we live in a world where everyone has a YouTube channel and a TikTok page, and anyone can say anything they want about God, about you. And so there are people who sit on a TikTok page and they get millions of followers and views and likes by sitting there and spouting all kinds of nonsense about reasons that God is stupid and reasons that Christians are idiots for believing in a God and reasons that God can't possibly exist. And I won't, of course, be able to refute every single question in 10 minutes, but what I want to give you is some ways to punch back and some ways to say, no, you're the idiot because you don't even understand these three basic things. These are three basic reasons for why anyone and everyone should believe in the existence of God. Because there are reasons for it. There are arguments for it. And I want to give you three of those arguments. So the first argument for the existence of God is called the natural argument. It's the argument from nature. I, by the way, did not make these up. These aren't my clever things I came up with. These have been in existence for thousands of years, literally. Oh, it's really interesting. A lot of the questions that people ask today, we talk about like they're brand new questions. When people say, well, you can't see God, so how do you know exist? Gotcha, checkmate, Christians. That's not a new question. That's not a new concept. That's been around for thousands of years, and there's really smart men and women who have answered all these questions already. So when some dude on a TikTok page or some chick with a YouTube page says, I'm really smart and here's why you shouldn't believe in God, they don't know what they're talking about and they haven't read enough and they haven't learned enough because people thousands of years older than them have already answered the questions that they're asking. So you should never go into these discussions, and you should never approach this moment and feel like, man, I don't know if I can believe in God. It's just so illogical, and there's so much science. And so, but listen, there's people who have answered and asked these questions, and they're far smarter than I am and you are, and they've given us good answers. The natural argument for God. When you look at the world, when you look at nature, nature is so well designed. Nature is so beautiful, so glorious, so unique, so complex. That when you look at nature, nature demands you to say, there must be someone who designed this thing. Dominic, I can't remember what I wrote in the notes up there, but I kind of wrote down a little bit of a definition after the natural argument. The beauty and complexity of nature point to God's existence. When you look at the world, you see how beautiful it is, you see how complex it is, and what we should recognize is it is impossible for this beauty and complexity to arise anyway without the existence of God. The world points to the logic and work of a grand designer. In science, we have this thing called the second law of thermodynamics. Here's what that means. It's things decay. When you have something put together really nice, that's going to break down over time. Has anyone ever bought a brand new shirt? Hopefully a lot of you. Or your mother has. I pray to God. And what you find is over the course, and thankfully this one isn't there yet, but what I find over the course of owning a shirt, random little holes just start to appear in it. And I don't know where they came from, because I didn't take a pin and just start poking holes in it. And yet, every time within 3 to 6 months, my shirts start to have little holes. For me, it's right around the belt buckle. I don't know why, that's just where it is. For some of you, it might be right here. It's different places, but you check a shirt out that you've had in your closet for a while, and you'll find little holes appear on it. Things break down over time. You ever built up a big old Lego set? It looks great. It's really beautiful and glorious. And what happens over time? Inevitably, pieces fall off. Things break. It gathers dust. Some of the adults in the room, you've bought a brand new shiny car. It's wonderful. It's awesome. You drive that thing everywhere. And inevitably, what happens over 2 to 5 years, that thing goes downhill. The tires get flat and need to be replaced. The transmission goes out and needs to be redone. The brakes go out and they need to be redone. And this thing costs hundreds and thousands of dollars to keep running and repair. Things slowly break down over time. Unless there's someone maintaining them, unless there's someone keeping them up, unless there's someone actively fixing them, things break down. The same is true of the world. If there was no God, if there was no grand designer, if there was no one creating and sustaining everyone and everything, things would break down and the world would cease to exist. This is what thermodynamics teaches us. Things go from complex to less complex. They don't go from not complex into complex. So when we look at creation, when we look at the fact that there's human beings living and breathing and walking, complex creatures that you and I couldn't build if we tried, you can give someone all the atoms and molecules and materials and minerals that they want, but they will not be able to build a human out of those things because we are too complex. Let alone could nature itself build those things. When you look at nature, the complexity of nature points to an intelligence that has ordered nature. In Romans chapter 1, verse 19, Paul argues it this way. I'll just read it off the screen because it'll be fast in finding my Bible. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. Verse 20. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. You cannot look at nature, you cannot look at creation and deny the existence of God. If you do, you are deceiving yourself or you are being deceived by someone else. You are without excuse. This is the natural argument. We'll move on. The moral argument. The moral argument. This is one of my favorite arguments for the existence of God. If we believe there's a moral law, then we must also believe that there is a moral lawgiver. If we believe in the existence of a moral law, right and wrong, good and evil, justice and wickedness, we must also believe there is a moral lawgiver. The fact that we have a sense of right and wrong, where did that sense of right and wrong come from? It didn't come from just looking at the world. All sorts of men and women have looked at the world and they've done evil, heinous things. How come we can call those things evil and heinous? It's like the cheater example, just to jump to Hitler, but let's jump to Hitler because I don't have a lot of time to do something more nuanced. Like we look at Hitler, mass murderer, anyone in here would say Hitler wasn't evil. Okay, cool, I don't have to make that argument to you. That's awesome. We all agree, Hitler was evil, right? How do we know that Hitler was evil? Because he killed people. How do we know that killing people is wrong? Well, because I don't want to die. Yeah, but that's just you. You don't want to die, but I want to kill you. And so how can you say that I'm wrong and that you're right? You can't. You can't. And you want to say something inside of you, even if you don't believe in God, there's something in you that wants to fight back and say, but it's wrong. But why is it wrong? And unless you acknowledge the existence of God, you cannot defend that statement. You cannot defend right and wrong, justice and evil. You cannot make those distinctions if you do not accept that there is someone, something out there that gives us a standard of right and wrong. You can't do it. You can argue with me until you're blue in the face, but I took philosophy and I took theology and I know the art they break down. There is no argument. Like my undergrad degree is in science. And science is really cool because it explains the world and it defines what is. But science cannot take you from what is into what ought to be. It can't cross that bridge. Science can only explain the world as it is. And so I took a bunch of psychology classes because my major is in psychology. And all my psychology classes could explain that people are bad and people do bad things. They could all do that, but none of them could tell you why they did that. They could say, well, because their mother treated them poorly, or because they had a negative experience in their childhood, or because years and years ago this thing happened, but they cannot tell you why that's wrong. All they can do is say, this is what happened and this is what they did, but it cannot tell you, and this is why it's wrong. And in fact, what all the psychology courses tell you to do when you come face to face with someone is you're supposed to just affirm them and say, yeah, I know you feel this way, but it's better for society if you live. Nonsense. You cannot tell someone right and wrong unless you acknowledge the existence of God. Here's a pastor I like. His name's Tim Keller, and he says this, and I think it really well sums up the moral argument. If there is no God, then evil and suffering and violence are perfectly natural. The weak are killed off. The stronger survive. That's the way the world is. There is no right and wrong. There is just what it is. To believe that some things that happen are evil requires some supernatural standard of good, something from outside of nature by which to judge which natural things are truly natural and which things are unnatural. If you're going to look at something and say that's evil, and look at something else and say that's good, you have to have a standard of good and evil. You have to have a standard of right and wrong. You have to. It is impossible otherwise. The moral argument. Finally, and I apologize in advance for this word, but it's what it's called, so I figure let's use the right word. The cosmological argument. The cosmological argument. I thought about shortening that just to the logical argument, but I thought, well, it's not my idea, and so I better give the guy who created it the right name. If I decided that I didn't like Chevy and I want to just call him Chevs, can't do that. The cosmological argument. Here's what the cosmological argument is. Everything in nature has a beginning. And so, there must be a beginner. And Dominic, I don't remember what I wrote. Oh, I got pretty close. Everything in nature has a beginning. And if there's a beginning, there must be a beginner. God is what's called the first cause. When you look at things in the world, you ask, where did it come from? Where did I come from? Well, about 25 years ago, Eric Jensen and Danielle Jensen fell deeply and madly and completely in love, and they decided they wanted a child as a sign and symbol of that love, and so they had me. And if you need more details than that, I refer you to your mother, your father, or a biology textbook. I'm here. I had a beginning. Well, where did they come from? Well, years and years and years and years and years ago, Rita Jensen and... I can't remember my grandfather's name.
Oh, goodness.
But it's not my fault. He wasn't a part of my life until I was 17, and so you can't fault me for not remembering his name. Terrible. Don and Rita Jensen, years and years ago, and Dan and Karen Fick, I remember them way easier. Dan and Karen Fick, Don and Rita Jensen both decided we love each other. We want to have a child, and so Don and Rita had Eric. Dan and Karen had Danielle. Danielle and Eric had me. And you can keep doing that back and back and back and back. And you get to the very first human. And you'll say, well, where did that human come from? And I don't have the degrees to answer that question for you. There's all sorts of different theories and ideas. But wherever that human came from, whether you want to say it came from an ape, whether you want to say God formed it from the dust, whether you want to say it's all symbolic and who knows, whatever you want to say, that ape had to come from somewhere. That dust had to come from somewhere. Your mom and your dad had to come from somewhere. And you keep tracing that back far enough, and wherever you say that's where it all came from, well, where did that come from? Okay, so it came from a Big Bang, millions and billions of years ago. Okay, so let's say that's how it worked. I'm not a scientist. I can't tell you yes or no. I don't know the science on it. Let's say it was a Big Bang. Where did that bang come from? Who started that bang? Again, science can tell you what happened. It can't tell you why it happened. And no scientist can say, this is what caused the Big Bang to bang. This is the switch. This is the fuse. This is where it came from. No one can tell you. If there was a beginning, there must be a beginner. There must be someone, some being, something that started it all off. And this is the most airtight argument for the existence of God, because you look at everything, and everything in nature came from somewhere. There's nothing that just popped into being. That's not how nature works. It all had to come from something, and where did that something come from? What started the whole process of creation? If there was a beginning, there must be a beginner. And you say, well, the universe has always existed. Matter has always existed. Well, then how come it's so hard to believe that there was a God who always existed? Why is that illogical for you? If you can say, well, matter and atoms and material were always there, and they just randomly decided to start. Well, how is that any more logical? How do you have a much better position than me, who says there was a divine being eons ago who determined to create everything that is? He always existed, and he, in his own sovereign free will, decided, I'm going to create the world. There's not one argument that's more logical than the other. Your argument is less logical because you want to say, I don't know how. It just happened. It just happened. The world is just chance and happenstance and circumstance? I refuse to believe that sort of world. Cosmological argument. If there's a beginning, there must be a beginner. And I will conclude with this before we talk about these in some small groups. A man by the name of Blaise Pascal, several hundred years ago, made this statement. It's called Pascal's wager. If God does not exist, you have nothing to lose by following him and believing in him. You follow the teachings of the Bible, you follow the ways of Scripture, you follow the teachings of Jesus. If you come to the end of your life and it was all false, you lost absolutely nothing. And in fact, you gained quite a bit, because what this book will teach you to do is how to live at peace with people around you. It'll teach you how to find joy and happiness even in the midst of deep, intense personal suffering. It'll show you how to find meaning in the middle of meaningless. It'll show you how to raise your children well so that they become productive members of society. Of course, it's so much bigger than that, and I argue this all the time. It's so much bigger than that. But if that's all it is, you've lost nothing by committing your life to follow God. But if God is real, if God does in fact exist, and I think that these arguments do adequately prove his existence, if God does in fact exist, and you determine, forget it, I'm not interested, I'm going to do something else, you have everything to lose. So make a wager. Place your bet. What are you going to bet on? See, the real deal is, the real objection everyone has to God is not God's illogical. It's not, well, I'm okay with saying that there was no beginning and there was no beginner. I'm okay with moral relativity. Everyone's argument and objection to God is really, we don't like to be told what to do. At the end of the day, we don't like someone else saying, you should live your life this way and not that way. We hate that. And so everything within our heart, everything within our soul, everything within our being resists that and fights against that. We don't like to submit to rules. We don't like to submit to authority. We don't want to submit to God. And so we deny his existence so that we can live freely as our own gods. This is what we've all done, and this is our natural bent and how we interact in the world. And what God does is he comes to us in our rebellion, in our brokenness, in our bitterness, and God works patiently and tenderly with our hearts. He draws us to himself. He calls us to himself. He calls us out of the darkness of idolatry, out of the darkness of rebellion, and he invites us to enter into life with him. That process might take 20 years for some of you, but I believe that the Bible tells me that that process will be effective. When God calls you, when God draws you, he will succeed every single time. And you can run as far as you want to run, and you can hide as deep away as you want to hide, but you will not escape the loving grace of God, and he will call you and pull you to himself. And so my invitation to you tonight is stop running, stop fighting, stop hiding, because it's pointless. You won't get away. Instead, embrace God who is already coming to embrace you. And what you will find is not judgment, not shame, not a slap in the face, how dare you. You will find his love, his grace, his acceptance. This is the gospel. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to go talk. Jesus, I thank you for your word. Lord, I thank you that you gave us logic. You gave us reasoning. You gave us the ability to make logical decisions and to figure out right from wrong and to figure out your existence. Lord, I thank you that you revealed yourself to us, that you stepped into our world. You didn't have to, but you did. Lord, I pray that we would recognize the reality of your existence. Lord, I pray that our hearts would be softened to your call, that we would sense your pull, that we would sense your call to us, and that we would respond and we would obey. Lord, I love you. I thank you. It's in your name I pray.